milk. This is the market experience. We're gonna spend a little over an hour exploring Pike Place Market, which is a district of Seattle. And that's kind of the more appropriate way to think of it because there's over 500 people who live in the market. And we have a dentist. Yeah. Well, we have a daycare, we have a senior center, we have a food bank as well. So it's a community, that's the point, yeah. But people think of it as a market because that's kind of at the core of it. The market that's here has been operating non-stop since 1907. So after 111 years, this is technically the longest continually operated farmers market in America. But I have to say it exactly like that or it's not true. You see, there are older markets, but they haven't been running continuously. So, yeah, or a day during the week. We do take 2 days off a year, and that's just Thanksgiving and Christmas. Otherwise, we're up and running every day, just like today, and that's what you're gonna see. Because every morning, all the producers show up and they do roll call. They start with the person who's been here the longest, they go one by one down the list. Seniority number 1 is somebody who's been selling belt buckles in the market for 50 years. Yeah, every day they pick their spots, and what that means is every day the market's different. So what we see today is unique to today. I can promise you it's never happened before, it'll never happen again. There's just too many variables. But you have to produce what you sell if you have a stand in the market. And that's about as authentic as it can possibly be. But we also have Starbucks. So how does that work? Well, that's why you're on the tour, I think. So these are some of the things we'll talk about. We'll learn about how the market works and operates, and we'll meet people in the market, and we'll sample some of my favorite food as we go around, and we'll go into hidden areas you might not find otherwise, and we'll definitely hang out with these crazy guys who throw fish at each other too. It's not. The name of the market is the name of the road. This road is Pike Place. But if you went back to 1907, the only thing that was here was the road. There were no buildings. The road back then was made out of wooden plank. Pike Place Market because they're all had required to be started here. But Starbucks technically started right there. Yeah. Yep. And not even in that building, so don't bother taking a picture. You can if it's not the original building. Starbucks was there in 1971. They were there for 5 years before they dropped their lease and got a lease over here instead. And then since then, the original building was torn down. But Starbucks got super famous after that, so then they just continued to call that one the original because the original moved over there. On their space, they also have to pay 10% of everything they make to the market to be here too. That's how it works if you're gonna have a shop here. But it is the only Starbucks that still uses this slightly inappropriate logo. Yeah. And a mermaid would work, but what works better for business is a siren. Because she's a siren and she's using her siren song to lure you in and become a good customer. But people get excited when they go here. They take a lot of pictures and a lot of times they focus on the 1912.
Oh yeah.
That's the address. Yeah, but the address leads so many people to walk away believing Starbucks is over 100 years old. Yeah, so every morning, this is about the finishing point. This is where it's kind of fun to be here. Because some people are already set up and other people are still setting up, and that helps to explain something. Farmers get to set up first because farmers started this market. So at 6 o'clock in the morning, farmers are all setting up and picking their spots, they're ready to go. But then at 9 o'clock, they cut it off, and then they do roll call for all the crafters. And they do that based on seniority. So the market is kind of set up, still setting up in the process right now, and you guys get to see that happening. So every day they do this since 1907 when the market first started. Now these guys, they don't pay rent. They just buy a permit every day they're here. Like every day, it's called a day permit. They're only here temporarily. They're only purchasing the space for the day, so that's all they have to pay. It's just that the rate is always different. It depends on how busy it might be. So the highest rate you'll ever pay, like right now on the weekends, like Saturday, you'll pay 38 bucks. Yep. That same spot on a Tuesday in February is $5.85. Yeah, you choose the days you want to be here. But farmers get to set up first. Say again? Donors. You're 100% right. But it can be confusing because you see famous people in the tiles all the time. Like Marilyn Monroe has a tile. But these were put in 1985. She had been dead over 20 years at that point. So how did that happen? Well, the market didn't care what you put if you bought a tile. So a lot of fans of celebrities bought tiles on their behalf, and it confuses people to this day because they've been in the market for 101 years this year, selling fish. Right this way. This is what's called a high stall. This was kind of a newer concept in 1917, because prior to this, it was just an open air market. People were setting up outside. But developers saw the potential and started building a lot of the buildings that are here. Knowing that farmers, like anybody, would want to pay a couple bucks to move indoors on a rainy day. But then they also built these permanent spots like this. And they made them stick out a little bit more. They're higher. That's why they call them high stalls. It's a huge advantage because you can lease a high stall on a year-to-year basis, so then everybody else is moving around, but you get to have the same spot every day. That's the basic concept. But these guys still have to set it up every single day. And they've been doing that here since 1917. Andrew is 116 years old. Yeah. It's the Omegas. It's the pit. Because of the way that that is prepared, this goes 3 days at room temperature. The reason I bring that up is because if you're flying home with it, you can put it in your carry-on bag and open it up on the plane. This little alley goes through the heart of all of Seattle. You can see how it goes all the way down that way. It's just you have to go underneath the building. It's called Post Alley. You see, this is where people used to tie their horses up. Hitching posts. There'd be thousands of them. This was the main drag. This is where people would tie up the horse so they could do their business in town. This is Choice Produce. This is another example of a high stall. So this is like a fish stand, only selling fruit. They're not growing the fruit themselves. That wouldn't be possible in a lot of cases. But we crave and demand these things. So these guys set it up, and kind of an art form in how this is done. I mean, a lot of time and effort goes into it, but think about it in a bigger scale. Every fruit stand is trying to be more photogenic than other fruit stands. Postcard photo. This sign is 90 years old. 90. It's one of the oldest examples of outdoor neon in the whole world, right there. So now anybody who uses the name Pike Place has to pay 8% royalties to the market to use that name. Think about that big picture. The most popular roast for coffee in the world is served at Starbucks. It's called the Pike Place Roast. And Starbucks has to pay this market to use that name. So anytime you have that roast, thank you. You didn't know it, but a portion of what you paid comes back to this market. Our mascot's a pig, and I get it, but it's brilliant. Our mascot's a piggy bank. And by sitting here, since 1986, she's generated $250,000 for charity. That's pretty smart. That money goes to the Market Foundation. They make contributions to the food bank, the senior center, the preschool. Check out the teeth. Thank you, Aaron. But their main thing is throwing fish. And they did that because it was faster. Fish need to be weighed and filleted and boxed up and priced out. By having somebody down here to throw the order, it's just way faster than walking down to grab it. It's just when they started throwing the fish, it became their thing. And people would gather around to watch them do it, and what they were doing was so much fun that camera crews came to film them. They do have a stunfish. Maybe it's 24. A stunfish. They go through 3 or 4 chum salmon every day, and they'll just toss it back and forth to entertain people. But they won't let you buy it. Because all they're doing is hand tenderizing the meat. Here we go.
It's a colder water river in Alaska, the Copper River, and it's one of the best salmon runs left in the world. So the fish that come back to spawn there have to run a 300-mile river, and so only big fish come back to. So
this got its start in the early 1990s. And nobody truly knows why it began, but it began a little bit differently than you might understand. This is a theater, and they specialize in improv comedy. So if you guys want to go see a show like Whose Line Is It Anyway, you guys can see a show here any night of the week. They've been running shows here for 35 years. Ryan Stiles and Joel McHale both got their start at this little theater. But in the early 1990s, people waiting in line before the doors would open would stick coins to the wall with gum. And nobody really knows why they did that. But it started as a coin wall. It didn't last long as a coin wall because eventually people realized there were coins on the wall. So in pocketing the coins, what was left was the gum. And then that's what people saw, and that became the trend. And this tour is designed to be much bigger picture than you may be used to on other tours you've done like this. So not only are we going to talk about the history that brings us up to this moment so that you know why this city is here at all, but we're also going to talk a lot about the city that you can engage now that you're here. The idea is by the time the tour is over, you should be able to have as much fun in Seattle as I do. Seattle's a hilly city. But San Francisco gets all the credit. And then people come here and they're not prepared. They're like, man, I thought all hills in America were in one city. No, we have a couple of hills here in Seattle too. But on this tour, this is the only hill we have to tackle. So rest assured, as soon as we're at the top, the tour is all downhill from there. So one thing I like to do, I like to give you guys a good photo while I talk. And if you didn't notice, there's a good photo. But at the top of the hill, it's a great photo. Oddly enough, the best photo is out in the middle of the road, and lucky for you, jaywalking is completely legal in the market, so take your photo and then get back. Because so much of what Seattle is at the moment is summed up in this one photo. We have an art installation. Hammering man, the hardest working man in Seattle, right there. All day, every day. But then you have the depth of the skyline, you have a historic building, and you have a gigantic construction project, and you can see it right there. All of that just screams Seattle. Big trees. Those trees would come right down these steep hills, and they would come right to the water's edge. And you have the deep waters of Puget Sound that connect to the open ocean. That's how Vancouver got here. We talked about that before. But if you take all of that and add it together, and then throw in the year 1852, this was possibly the best place in the world to build a sawmill. So in 1852, a man named Henry Esler built a sawmill right here in the corner. That one fire consumed 33 blocks of Seattle in a day. And remember, there's only 25,000 people in the town at that point. So to this day, this is the largest proportional fire in American history. But nobody died. The city burns down, nobody died. You don't even have to feel bad as a town. And cabinets are made out of wood, that's a small part of it. It's just that the catalyst in the fire was glue. In making cabinets, they used glue, and they still do today. It's just that back then, glue was condensed animal fat, bubbling in pots over open flame. It's kind of a recipe for grease fires. But the city goes up in flames, and to represent the components of the fire, you can see a cabinet. Now some of you might have leaves on the way, so shift yourself around. The cabinet door is open. Balanced on the cabinet door, just waiting to fall, is the pot of glue. So remember that First Avenue used to be called Front Street? And remember that because of all the growth after the fire, a railroad was built right to Seattle from St. Paul, Minnesota. Put up in Seattle was put up right here in 1899. It's just that was a totem pole that people from Seattle had stolen from a village in Alaska. Yeah, we had a stolen totem pole. And the tribe sued to get it back. But it was 1899. And if things aren't fair today, they really weren't fair back then. Now we don't know why, but somebody set that totem pole on fire in 1938. So Seattle scoops up the ashes and the remains of that totem pole and then finally gives it back. Surprisingly, even though it was ruined, that tribe, once they got the first one back, carved us this one right here free of charge. It's been standing here ever since. It's just that all these years later, we've come to a much better understanding of the symbolism, the message that is in the totem pole. And we're pretty sure it's what the people who carved it would call a shame pole. Carved for no other reason than to be a large middle finger in downtown Seattle. Coordinated effort could make Seattle prosperous again, even though there were no more trees and no definable industries. And boy, did that gamble pay out. Because quite literally, right after this city was rebuilt, people discovered gold in the Klondike River. On the right is the Smith Tower. And the Smith Tower is one of planet Earth's original skyscrapers. close to 500 feet. The Smith Tower was built in 1914. The Columbia Tower is 50% higher than the Space Needle, and you can get up there for 1/4 the price, because the Space Needle can cost as much as $30. That costs $15, which is half. I want you to learn a little bit about this building too. As we walk by, you're going to notice some of the finer details. This is a really old building, but it's still functionally being used in a way for its original purpose. If you guys see the pulleys and the wedge, that's because this is originally a coal-powered steam plant. There used to be trains coming down this alley filled with coal. That's why the pulleys and the wedge are there, because they used to hoist the coal. That's why our waterfront boulevard is still called the Alaskan Way Boulevard all these years later. And that's our past, and it's cool, and it's always going to be here. But our future is Big Bertha. Big Bertha was the world's largest diameter tunneling machine. And she had been digging underneath Seattle for 4 years. She had been digging underneath Seattle for so long that most of us forgot about Big Bertha. Until 1 year ago, when out of the blue, she just popped out. Well, that tunnel is where all this traffic is going by Thanksgiving, because the tunnel is done. It's ready to go. So all this traffic's going underneath Seattle by Thanksgiving, and then by December is the scheduled demolition of the 66-year-old highway you see right here. Getting rid of the highway is going to change this city forever, and we were smart enough to put in its place what is potentially going to be America's most beautiful waterfront park.